July 12, 1943. The sun barely crests the horizon over the rolling fields outside Prokhorovka, a village etched into the southern reaches of the Kursk salient. The air carries the metallic tang of impending violence, a mixture of soil churned by tracks, gun oil, and the faint, acrid sting of distant artillery fire. Dawn light glances off the steel hulls of T-34 tanks lined up in cautious formation, their crews tense, eyes scanning the far tree line where the German Panzers are rumored to mass. Lieutenant General Pavel Rotmistrov, perched atop a muddy embankment, surveys the scene with a mixture of grim anticipation and calculated resolve. Around him, his officers whisper in clipped tones, their faces streaked with the dust of early reconnaissance. They have 600 T-34s under their command, but beyond the ridge, intelligence reports indicate a formidable foe. SS Panzer Grenadiers, bristling with Tiger and Panther tanks, ready to rip through any frontal assault. Every soldier knows that today may decide the fate of the Kursk front. Among the Soviet ranks, Captain Grigory Panezhko is a quiet, observant figure, his hands tightening around the controls of his T-34 as he watches the morning mist crawl over the terrain. Unlike the larger formations preparing for the charge, Panezhko commands only 4 tanks, a seemingly insignificant number in the face of the German war machine. But each man in his platoon feels the weight of a destiny far greater than the sum of their armor. Birdsong is drowned out by the distant rumbles of engines and the sporadic crackle of reconnaissance fire. Dust kicks up in spiraling columns, mingling with the smoke from field artillery as Rotmistrov's headquarters issues final orders. Tank crews perform last-minute checks, tracks glint under the weak sunlight, turret hatches squeak open, and the hum of engines grows steadily, a low, vibrating heartbeat against the anticipation. The ridge ahead, a subtle rise against the flat steppe, holds a strategic choke point. Its capture, or defense, could mean the difference between a breakthrough that crushes Soviet lines or a stalwart defense that staves off destruction. Panezhko's 4 T-34s inch forward, moving as one unit, aware that their mission is not to advance, but to hold, to anchor the ridge against the oncoming storm. Time seems suspended as the first reports trickle in, German tanks spotted in the distance, their silhouettes dark against the glimmering fields. The SS Panzer Grenadiers advance in precise formation, confident in the reputation of their superior armor and training. Yet, as Panezhko squints through his binoculars, he notes something the Germans might not suspect. The T-34's sloped armor and agility make it a devilish opponent in defensive positions, and on this ridge, with the sun at their backs and the earth favoring them, 4 T-34s might just be enough to challenge an entire division. The tension is palpable. Every creak of metal, every distant engine growl, every whisper of wind carries with it the promise of violence. Soldiers grip their controls, fingers trembling despite the morning chill. In the distance, the German panzers advance, a rolling thunder threatening to break the line. For Rotmistrov, for Panezhko, for the men who will face death today, there is no turning back. The stage is set. By mid-morning, the distant roar of German engines grows into a relentless thunder, shaking the ground beneath the T-34s. Captain Panezhko leans forward in his command tank, the hatch rattling as he barks quiet orders through his intercom. The 4 tanks fan out slightly, hugging the contours of the ridge, their shadows long and dark across the dew-slick grass. Every soldier knows the calculus. One wrong move, one exposed flank, could mean annihilation. Then it happens. A single Panther tank crests the ridge first, its long 75mm gun glinting under the harsh sun.
Paneshko holds his breath, waits for the precise moment, then signals to his gunner. The T-34's 76.2mm shell streaks across the field, striking the Panther's side armor. There's a flash, a deafening crunch, and the German tank halts abruptly, smoke curling from its turret. The other T-34s follow suit, unleashing a disciplined, relentless hail of shells. The Germans are momentarily stunned. They expected resistance from hundreds of tanks, not a tiny platoon embedded on the ridge with deadly precision. But Paneshko's men are seasoned, trained in both patience and audacity. Every shot is calculated, every maneuver designed to exploit the T-34's sloped armor and mobility. The ridge, small and seemingly insignificant, becomes a fortress. Over the next 6 hours, a cat-and-mouse ballet unfolds. German panzers and panzer grenadiers attempt flanking maneuvers, seeking weak points in the Soviet line. The T-34s shift, pivot, and retreat slightly when necessary, always returning fire with brutal efficiency. Each tank that falls to the Soviets sends a ripple of shock through the advancing Germans, whose confidence begins to waver. Shells tear through the earth around the T-34s, dirt and splintered wood flying into the morning air. But Paneshko's men hold their ground. Lieutenant General Rotmistrov watches from a knoll behind the ridge, his binoculars trained on the unfolding chaos. He notes the audacity of 4 tanks facing an entire panzer division, each T-34 seemingly impervious to the concentrated German fire. He signals for reserves to prepare, though he hopes they may never be needed. If Paneshko can hold, the entire assault may falter. By midday, 28 German tanks lie in smoking wrecks across the field. The ridge has become a symbol of Soviet tenacity and tactical brilliance. German commanders call for coordinated artillery support, yet the terrain favors the defenders. The shells are less accurate, delayed by the rolling hills, and often fall short. The T-34s exploit every crest, every dip, their movements almost imperceptible to the enemy, until a shell erupts, another Panther bites the dust. Amid the roar, the men themselves are almost ghosts. Dust coats their faces, sweat drips into eyes stinging from the gunpowder, and yet there is a singular focus, a quiet determination. Paneshko's voice cuts through the clatter occasionally, sharp and precise, guiding each maneuver, calculating each angle, refusing to yield even an inch. The German advance, once confident and methodical, now teeters on the edge of chaos, slowed and demoralized by a mere handful of Soviet tanks. And as the sun climbs high overhead, the impossible begins to take shape. What was expected to be a massacre, a swift, decisive German breakthrough, has transformed into a grinding stalemate. The 4 T-34s anchoring the ridge with unmatched ferocity. The battle for Prokhorovka, and perhaps the fate of Kursk itself, hangs on the courage and cunning of these few men and their steel beasts.
By mid-afternoon, the field outside Prokhorovka has become a hellscape of smoke, scorched earth, and twisted steel. The sun glares down, reflecting off splintered tank hulls as the thunder of gunfire ebbs and flows like waves crashing against an unyielding cliff. Captain Paneshko's 4 T-34s, battered but unbowed, continue to anchor the ridge, each tank a solitary beacon of defiance against the overwhelming force arrayed before them. German officers, their pride as wounded as their advancing units, now scan the battlefield with a mix of disbelief and frustration. What was supposed to be a rout has turned into a grinding quagmire. Panzer divisions, trained and feared across Europe, falter in the face of the unexpected. Smoke curls from destroyed tanks. Soldiers shout orders that are lost in the chaos. And for the first time, the invaders sense that victory may slip through their fingers. Inside his command tank, Paneshko is a portrait of calm intensity. Every movement is precise. Every shot fired is deliberate. He coordinates with his small platoon, moving them to key positions to exploit the German formation's overconfidence. Tracks churn the earth as the T-34s pivot, their armor sloping just enough to deflect incoming shells. The Germans' superior weaponry, the long-barreled 75mm and 88mm guns, cannot find purchase on such agile, well-positioned tanks. Rachmistrov watches the battlefield unfold like a chessboard of steel and smoke. From his vantage point, he can see the German cohesion breaking. Units hesitate, unsure of whether to press forward or pull back, and their carefully orchestrated advance begins to splinter under the relentless defense. The ridge, once a minor geographic feature, has become the fulcrum on which the battle turns. As hours drag on, the mental toll on the German forces becomes evident. Exhaustion, fear, and mounting casualties slow their advance to a crawl. Paneshko's tanks, though few, exact a psychological toll equal to their physical destruction. Each Panther or Panzer that falls sends a ripple of panic through the enemy ranks. The once unshakable confidence of the SS Panzer Grenadiers falters. Whispers of retreat grow louder, mingling with the distant thunder of artillery that now falls behind the ridge rather than in front. By late afternoon, the cumulative effect of 6 hours of relentless T-34 resistance is undeniable. Captain Paneshko's platoon, despite being outnumbered nearly 50-1, has halted an entire Panzer division. German commanders, once certain of their victory, begin to withdraw, their advance collapsing into an uneasy, disorganized retreat. The battlefield, so recently dominated by the shadow of German steel, is now dominated by the courage and cunning of a handful of Soviet tank crews. The ridge stands as a silent monument to audacity and tactical brilliance. Smoke and dust hang in the air, mingling with the acrid smell of burned fuel and scorched metal. Paneshko surveys the battlefield, exhausted but resolute, aware that today they have not just defended a piece of earth, they have turned the tide. The retreating Germans leave behind a trail of wreckage, a testament to the impossible achievement of 4 tanks holding firm against the mightiest armored units in Europe.
This moment, the dramatic stand on the ridge, will echo far beyond Prokhorovka. Hitler's forces, halted and humiliated, will begin to reconsider the Kursk offensive. The gamble that was meant to crush Soviet resistance has ended in a stinging failure, turning Kursk into the Eastern Front's last great German bet, and setting the stage for a Soviet counteroffensive that will never be forgotten. As the smoke begins to clear over the ridge, the battlefield is a scene of surreal stillness. Twisted steel and shattered earth stretch as far as the eye can see, punctuated by the occasional plume of smoke from a burning German tank. The roar of engines has faded, replaced by the distant murmur of soldiers regrouping and the rattling of shovels digging temporary graves. Captain Paneshko steps out of his command tank, the heat from the engine warming his gloves, and surveys what has been wrought by sheer determination and tactical skill. Around him, his crew emerges cautiously, faces smeared with grime and sweat, yet alight with the quiet elation of survival against impossible odds. Each man knows they have witnessed something extraordinary. 4 T-34s, the backbone of their platoon, have withstood the fury of an entire Panzer division. The ridge they defended is no longer merely a rise in the steppe. It is a symbol of Soviet resilience, a testament to the fact that courage, cunning, and discipline can rival even the deadliest of machines. Rachmistrov rides along the ridge, personally congratulating the survivors. His expression is one of tempered relief. He knows the cost of victory is measured not just in destroyed tanks, but in lives worn thin by battle.
Yet he also recognizes the psychological impact of this stand. Word of the Ridge, of 4 tanks holding back the might of Hitler's armored elite, will spread quickly. It will bolster the morale of the Soviet forces across the front, a vivid reminder that even the most fearsome enemy can be resisted. On the German side, the retreat is somber and tense. Officers tally losses in disbelief. 28 tanks destroyed, hundreds of men killed or wounded, their advance blunted by a force they underestimated. The psychological shock reverberates through the ranks. Where there had been confidence, now there is caution. Where there had been momentum, now hesitation. For Hitler's generals, Kursk becomes not the decisive triumph they envisioned, but a perilous gamble that has cost them dearly. Back on the ridge, the Soviet infantry begins to move forward cautiously, securing the area and tending to the wounded. Medics drag soldiers to makeshift triage stations, and engineers work to remove damaged vehicles that block the narrow paths. Paneshko sits for a moment in the shade of his tank, his mind running through the day's maneuvers, every decision, every shot fired. He knows that luck played a role, yes, but so did preparation, coordination, and the unyielding resolve of his men. As evening descends over Prokhorovka, the sun dips low, casting long shadows across the scarred steppe. The ridge, once a silent, unassuming feature of the landscape, now stands as a sentinel over a battlefield that has witnessed the improbable. Stories of bravery, of steel against steel, of the T-34's sloped armor deflecting the lethal German shells will spread far beyond these fields. They will inspire songs, articles, and eventually the retelling of history itself.
In the grand scope of the Eastern Front, the defense of the ridge marks a turning point. The Germans, their offensive momentum broken, are forced into a defensive posture, giving the Soviets a strategic opening that will not be squandered. Kursk, once Hitler's bold gamble to crush the Soviet army, has faltered. And at the heart of it, 4 tanks on a ridge outside Prokhorovka stand as a testament to what courage and ingenuity can achieve even against overwhelming odds. In the days that follow, the ridge outside Prokhorovka becomes a symbol, both for the Soviet Union and for the German High Command. Dispatches travel quickly from the front lines to Moscow, describing how a handful of T-34s, led by Captain Grigory Paneshko, had held firm against an SS Panzer division. Newspapers and radio reports highlight the courage and discipline of the men, but in the corridors of the Kremlin, military strategists recognize the broader significance. Kursk, Hitler's last major gamble in the East, has failed, and the momentum of the Eastern Front has irrevocably shifted. For Paneshko and his crew, the glory is quiet, earned in smoke and blood. The men return to their duties, tending to tanks that are scorched, dented, and covered in battle grime. Each shell scar and dent is a badge of honor, a proof of their audacity and skill. They are hailed as heroes, yet the victory is bittersweet. Comrades are lost, and the memories of men screaming through ruptured hatches linger. Still, their actions have changed the course of history. A single platoon's stand has stalled the mightiest armored assault Hitler could muster, giving the Soviets a breathing room to reorganize, counterattack, and eventually push the Germans back across the Eastern Front. In Berlin, the failure at Kursk sends shockwaves through the German military. Hitler's generals, who had counted on overwhelming armored superiority, are forced to reassess strategy. The loss is not just tactical, but psychological. The myth of German invincibility has been shattered, and the Eastern Front, once seen as a conduit for swift victory, has become a grinding war of attrition that favors the Soviets' depth, resilience, and ingenuity. Historians later describe Prokhorovka as a turning point, not just in terms of tanks destroyed or ground gained, but in morale and perception. The image of 4 T-34s holding a ridge against an entire division encapsulates the essence of Soviet defense:
relentless, adaptive, and unflinching. It demonstrates that technological superiority, while important, is never absolute, and that human courage and tactical acumen can defy even the most formidable odds. Today, the ridge is remembered not merely as a geographic location, but as a testament to audacity in the face of overwhelming power. Monuments stand to commemorate the bravery of those who fought there, and military academies study the engagement as an example of effective defensive tactics under extreme pressure. Captain Grigory Penezhko's name endures alongside his crew as a symbol of how discipline, courage, and split-second decision-making can alter the course of history. The battle at Prokhorovka and the defiance of a single T-34 platoon reshaped the Eastern Front. It stalled Hitler's advance, preserved Soviet strategic options, and laid the foundation for a series of offensives that would eventually drive the German forces back to Berlin. For anyone standing on that ridge, looking out over the scarred fields, the lesson is unmistakable. In war, sometimes it takes just a few to stop the many, and bravery above all is the weapon that endures beyond the battlefield.